Shabbat Shalom. First, I want to start out by thanking Rabbi Zeleny for allowing me to give the Devar today. You were away on your development program and a little bit busy. We saw some social media comments from you, so that was great, learning a few things. Today I want to do my Devar. Back in April, Karen and I took a trip to Central Europe. We went to Poland, Czech Republic, and Germany. And one of the challenges that I dealt with, and I spent some time with the rabbi talking about, is how do you process all this? How do you take all this in that you see and experience and get it out so that you can accept it and also teach others at the same time? And so we talked about it, and the suggestion was, why don't you just do a Devar on it? And while I'm gone, probably a good time for you to do that. So the trip we took was with Temple Emmanuel. Karen, my wife, was the program manager for that, so obviously I got to go along with it. And the theme of the trip was a journey of memory and hope. And you can see later, there's a 70-page book that my lovely bride put together on our trip, so you can see that later on today in the Oneg. As we prepared for the trip, one of the things that I looked at is several have been, if you've been to Israel, but how many of us have actually traveled to Europe, to Central Europe, and seen and experienced what that's like? A handful have done so at the most. I was personally very anxious for that trip. What am I going to see? What am I going to experience? How am I going to deal with seeing this history? Most of us, our family roots come from somewhere in Central Europe. And so how was I going to deal with this and look at it and make it part of my life and make it something I can bring back to my family and to the congregation? Also, when we're going over there, I was concerned, what's the anti-Semitism situation like now? What's it like as you go through different parts of Europe? You read things, you hear things about what the world's like over there, and what were we going to experience, and how is that going to affect us? And are they progressive, or are they backward countries? How are things happening in the area? At the same time, we were planning on the trip, and I was thinking, okay, we're going to Central Europe, we're going to Auschwitz and Birkenau and Theresienstadt, and we're going to see the ghettos. And that was one part of the trip that was very anxious and concerning for me as far as how we're going to deal with it. But the other part that we did, which I thought was great, is we looked at it as a continuum of Jewish history in Europe, in Central Europe. We looked at actually the last 1,000 years history of Jews in Europe. And to me, that was very interesting, as you see kind of an ebb and flow of different aspects of Judaism woven through the history of Europe from the times. Back in 1860, the first Spanish Jewish merchants visited Poland. In 1096, the Jews settled in Poland. In the late 1400s, there were 60 Jewish communities in Poland. 1580 to 1650 were called the Golden Age. That's when everybody seemed to get along. That was great to know that something positive was in there. And then looking at some stats on it also, in 1865, 90% of the Jews were urban. So the Jewish community was within the cities and in the urban areas, and they were contributing. They were contributing as merchants, they were contributing as scholars, they were contributing to leadership in the community. That's what the Jews were doing in that period of time. In 1921, there were 3 million Jews in Poland. In the 30s, that's when we saw the rise of communism, socialism, and also some of the economic change that brought up the Nazi Party. When we arrived in Berlin, I'm going to give you a little story of how our trip occurred, because I think it's important to see, again, quite a bit of a roller coaster ride of a trip. We got there, arrived in Berlin, and we were met by Paul and Ray Koch. Many of you know Paul and Ray from the congregation, and they made sure that we were treated well when we got there. But at the same time, we went to an area called Track 17. Track 17 in Berlin is where they brought the Jews and literally put them on the train and sent them off to ghettos or to camps, wherever they were sending them. And as we're standing there, we look down, and there's a plaque, several plaques, I don't know, maybe 50 or 60 different plaques. They say the date, the number of people, and where they went. And we were standing there, in this book, there's a picture of the date we were there, 50 people going to Birkenau. And I'm standing there thinking, oh my gosh, 70 years difference, where would I be? And where could those people be from back then? We also walked 17 miles or 18 miles in Berlin for 2 days and got to experience all the positives of an exciting city, but at the same time we went to the Jewish History Museum and also Topography of Terre. In the Jewish History Museum, there's an exhibit, it's an open area, and you think of that as what could have been. It's a wide open area, there's just walls and kind of flat paint on the wall. And we heard this noise as we're walking around, and the noise, they had in a small room, a little corridor, an area called Fallen Faces. And an artist had taken metal faces, carved out metal faces, and literally thousands of them going in a line kind of off into the distance. And you're just looking at that, and we're sitting there and reflecting what could have been, and what could have been for our Jewish community. In Warsaw, we went to Warsaw, and interesting thing about Warsaw that I didn't know is I knew Warsaw was pretty much demolished in World War II, and they bombed it and everything happened there. But the city was actually rebuilt 10 feet higher because they actually took and rebuilt the city above all the ruins. That's how they did it. And as they go in and do more building, they're finding remnants from World War II. They found some unexploded munitions and some other things as they've done some excavations. We went to the Warsaw Ghetto, and we kind of walked to see the markings of that. And we were able to see one wall that still stands from the Warsaw Ghetto. And what was really interesting and kind of unique to see is you're standing there, there's some pictures in here with the wall and the barbed wire in it. But as you're standing there looking at that, you see people in their apartments, they're walking around, they're doing the day-to-day business, and it's almost like you become desensitized to it because it's there, but it's always there. To them, it's always been there. We also went to, on this trip, they made sure that we honored people from the past, and we went to several different cemeteries. But in the cemetery in Warsaw, we came across an area that was probably about the size of this seating area over here. And in that area, there were stone posts with a red stripe in a circle. And that red stripe represented a mass grave that they had. And I'm just standing there looking at it and couldn't believe what I was seeing, but that's what was there. And again, recognizing, seeing, and accepting what our history was. From there, we went to Krakow. Krakow is a beautiful city. The architecture there is beautiful. We got to go from Warsaw to see something positive in Krakow and see a beautiful city, see capitalism rising. And one of the people on the trip said, "Why are they charging for carriage rides, and why are they charging and selling these tchotchkes over here?" I said, "Because this is capitalism. They're learning capitalism. Let them learn it. Let's give them some money. Let them learn capitalism." So we were part of that and dealt with that. And then we went over to another area, another ghetto area, and here it was interesting is that as they brought the Jews into the different ghettos and around the area, they tried to bring it together so that they had some type of normalcy or could perceive some type of normalcy through what they were dealing with. And so and it still stands there. They decided there as they built the wall to the ghetto, they were going to let a specific pharmacy stay there. And the pharmacy would stay there so that all the Jews that lived in the ghetto could come in and still get their medication, or still do things they needed to do for commerce in that one pharmacy. Obviously, over time that changed, but that stood there. And then there was another area right outside that where there were 62 chairs, these tall chairs about this tall, each representing 100 Jews that were deported from that area. From there, we went to Prague, and I know some of you have been to Prague. It's amazing. Beautiful, amazing area. That area wasn't bombed or destroyed at all because the Germans even thought it was a beautiful area to be there. But we did all this and we saw all this, and constantly we're battling. We're battling with the excitement of seeing and a challenge of being and a challenge of our history, and how to put all this together. And I can't thank you enough for at least giving me the chance to get this out, because this is pretty difficult to deal with. But when we got to Germany, I didn't like it when I first got there. I didn't like hearing the language. I didn't like seeing the flag. I didn't like anything about it when I first got there. And then as you start walking around and seeing the people and seeing what's going on, Germany has kind of owned up to some parts of this. There are different areas, different exhibits, things that you can see that commemorate and document what happened in Berlin, and we were in Berlin. We had Jeff Markowitz gave me the best advice on the next thing I'm going to talk about. Between Jeff and Ed, they run our Reading of the Names program, and it's a beautiful program. We happened to be landing in Berlin as the Reading of the Names program for this year was ending, so we couldn't Skype in. I know Paul and Ray were able to. But Jeff said, when you go there, you're going to have to just take it in and understand it and feel it and let it do what it's going to do. And when we got there and we saw the gate at Auschwitz, Arbeit macht frei, work makes you free. You see that and you see what people saw as they went in. We toured the area, and a lot of it if you've seen Schindler's List, if you've seen movies, if you've seen books, if you've read things, it's all, you've seen it, but you've never seen it till you've actually been standing there and experienced it. And we went through different walkways, and there were walls of pictures of individuals that they happened to capture pictures of, the people that were at Auschwitz. And you just walk and you see, and that person looks like someone I know. That person looks like someone I know. And it's amazing. It's amazing to deal with. And I've been to the Holocaust Museum here in Dallas. I've been to the Holocaust Museum in DC. I've been to Yad Vashem in Israel. But nothing's like this. Nothing at all is like this. And we walked through the area where they brought the Jews, and they had the shower area. And I walked there, and you stand there and you look and you can't believe in your disbelief. And then when I stood there, I was walking out and touched the wall as I'm walking out. And that's where, as our guide told us, at some point it's going to hit you. That's where it hit me. That's where I'm standing there thinking, if not for time in life, if not for who I am and where I am, that could have been me standing there. Which of my relatives were there? As we came out, there's a room. It's probably a 20 by 40 room with just piles and piles of flipping books with names. And I was able to find the name of my grandparents from both sides of my family and see them there. As we went to Birkenau, so when they told us we were going to Auschwitz and Birkenau, I looked at it and said, okay, I'll go. Well, Birkenau is more open, so I thought of it more open, meaning someplace I can sit and reflect about what we were dealing with. And I didn't know what I was going to see at Birkenau. Birkenau was vastness, but it was vastness of destruction, vastness of terror. And it overcame us. We had our guide, Paul, had a friend, a survivor, who he came on these tours with for a number of years, who always loved telling the story of how he survived in the camp. And his friend, Pavel, passed away a month before we got there. And so Paul did a cottage for his friend Pavel as we stood at Birkenau, right by the train tracks, standing right there. And it just tears you apart, but at the same time, again, you have to accept it. Everything I'm saying is something we have to accept and understand, so we know not to repeat it, so we learn from it, and also we learn how to move forward from it. All these things have to happen. And moving forward, again, we went from our next place we saw was Theresienstadt, and that was very interesting because we had a survivor. Her name was Doris. I can't remember her last name. But as you walk through the museum, Doris' picture is on the wall. She was a young girl, about 12 or 14 years old when she was there, and she was a shepherd, I think. I think she worked with the sheep or something like that. But constantly she was asking, tell me a question, ask me a question. I don't know what to tell you, just keep asking me questions. And she had the quickest wit and the best sense of humor. And at the same time, we're walking through, at the end of it, we're saying, okay, let's take some pictures with you, etc. And we're in this one large room, and this group of middle schoolers come through. One of the things that I'm very encouraged about what I'm seeing over in our places we were able to visit, at least, is that the Polish, the Czech, and the German communities are making it important for the children, the younger kids, to understand what happened, to understand, to accept it, to own it, and not to let it repeat. And as we were there, we're talking, and and Doris is talking to us, and all these kids are gathering around, like, who's this, what's going on? And she starts speaking to them in their native language, and they didn't realize that she was a survivor. They had never met a survivor. And to see their faces and to see how they accepted her and understood what they were dealing with was amazing, absolutely amazing. There's positives that we've seen also, a lot of positives that we saw. One of the things I think is great, and Arnie was talking about it before services this morning, is the rebirth of the Jewish identity in Central Europe, Central Eastern Europe, wherever you are, they call it something different. But there are a lot of Jews in their 20s discovering their Judaism in their 20s. They're walking around the house with their parents or grandparents and saying, what are these candlesticks for? Or what's this book? What is this language in this book? I don't understand what this is. Were you Jewish? Are you Jewish? Because their parents and grandparents, through the time of communism and Nazism and communism, they didn't want to identify as Jews. They don't want to be counted as Jews. But now these young adults are stepping up, and they're stepping up quickly. We had one young lady that said she discovered her Judaism, and she was asked, well, what do your friends feel about this? Well, my friends are Jewish, and they accept me. What about the other people? I don't care. I don't care about those other people. So that's the point, is that they're finding their way, they're getting their points through it. And we had a Shabbat dinner in the JCC in Krakow, and that's great. Okay, you have a Shabbat dinner in Krakow, but do you have a Shabbat dinner in a JCC that's 4 stories tall, that every floor is full of people having Shabbat dinner together, and walk in and not worry about security? That's what we experienced in Krakow. It was absolutely amazing. As we look through the Torah portion, the Korach talks about, and it talks about where it's inciting rebellion against Moses and challenging the priesthood. And then Aaron takes his staff, smacks it into the earth, and an almond blossoms out of the staff. And I look at that, and I'm being very short on it because I want to get to my other points. But I look at that, and I think of the flowering staff as a sign of renewal and opportunity. Even in the darkest of times, the darkest of times that we have, God is always there with us in some way. He's in our soul, he's in the souls of those who have come before us, and he'll be in the souls of those who are after us. Lastly, I want to think about those who lost their lives in the church in Charleston this week, and I have a poem that we did several readings during our trip, so I want to read this both in memory of those in Charleston, also from what I've talked about so far. Each person has a name. We each have a name given by God and given by our father and mother. We each have a name given by our stature and smile and given by our attire. We each have a name given by the hill and by the walls. We each have a name given by the stars and given by our friends. We each have a name given by our sins and given by our yearnings. We each have a name given by our enemies and given by love. We each have a name given by celebrations and given by work. We each have a name given by the seasons and given by our blindness. We each have a name given by the sea and given by our death. I hope and pray we continue to remember and honor those who were lost in the Holocaust, and at the same time I'm encouraged by the revitalization of the young Jewry in the part of the world that's been torn apart by hatred. Shabbat Shalom.